Hear the best of TNCRadio.live every night. It's TNC Radio Primetime. Interviews, music, information, and news you can use every night, 7 to 9 Eastern, 6 to 8 Central, TNC Radio Primetime.
Hello, everybody. This is Todd Dewey from Ice Road Truckers on the History Channel, and I love to listen to TNCRadio.live.
You're listening to Mind Your Trucking Business on TNCRadio.live, where James Rogers, Jamie Irvine, and Tom Kelly provide owner-operators of commercial trucks with expert advice about starting, operating, and growing a professional trucking fleet. It's time to mind your trucking business.
Ron, thanks for the great introduction. My name is Jamie Irvine. I'm with Tom Kelly. Tom, how are you doing today?
Fantastic.
And we're with James Rogers. James, nice to have you on the show again.
Oh, thank you. So it's great to be here. Finally at home for a little bit of a break.
So, well, that's good. You've been on the road the last couple times that we have been on the air, and I know you've been having some challenges. This show, Mind Your Trucking Business, it's all about helping people who currently are drivers. Maybe they're a company driver or they're an owner operator, and they'd like to start their own fleet. And we're here to try to help them and guide them, but also to talk about things that are happening that affect the trucking industry and would impact somebody who's trying to get their fleet set up and off the ground and trying to build that trucking business. So, James, when you've been on the road and you've been having some challenges, what kind of challenges have you been having? There's an update that we're looking for from the last time we talked, but for maybe someone who's listening for the first time, they need to hear a little overview of what you've been going through.
Oh, well, I guess we could just kind of start. It's gone from everything from stop. CVSA inspection week was coming up, so I'd stopped to get a DOT inspection done on a truck and trailer that needed to be done. It wasn't due yet, but I wanted to get ahead of the game. More importantly, just to get an additional set of eyes on my equipment and make sure there wasn't anything I was missing. And it went from a DOT inspection to basically a $6,000 bill where they had to replace some trailer hubs and all that stuff. Well, just without the details, about within 100 miles, my trailer was almost on fire. Entire brake system was compromised from improper installation along with the improper parts that were used by the service provider to basically up until in the last week or so with this particular service provider talking to their corporate and inspectors and everything with the investigation that was done. Finally, an agreement was reached to where they compensated me. They actually, I think they treated me quite fairly, honestly. Pretty much recouped everything in what I invested into it, just because the tech, they're actually going to send the tech back through training. That was one of the compromises that they wanted to offer to me in order to take the financial settlement, which I won't disclose that, but I did. I pretty much compensated everything all the way to, I had a couple other trucks that needed parts. They broke down on the side of the road, and I'm running all over the country, and while I'm on the road trying to run parts down and get them to these guys I come home in my own personal pickup truck, picking up parts in St. Louis to take them to drivers in Memphis that don't have, can't find the parts in Memphis, to trucks breaking down and roadside can't get to them until the next day or sometime the next day, or trying to get hold of a wrecker. And it's been hectic to say the least.
So, James, what this really highlights for me is that if you're a company driver and this happened to you, you'd phone dispatch and you'd let them know what's going on. And, it would probably be an impact on you. Maybe you don't get home to your family on time. You might have to stay in a hotel. The company's going to cover those expenses for you. It would be stressful because your life was at risk when that trailer was almost on fire and you were having an issue on the highway. So the company driver would have all of those same stresses. But after the truck got fixed and things got back on the road, the company driver's experience pretty much ends and they just go back to work and do their job. But you as a business owner, not only did you have to keep your own business running, but then you had to deal with corporate, you had to try to negotiate a settlement. And James, I'm so happy to hear that settlement came in your favor, but it didn't necessarily, that wasn't a given, was it? I mean, it could have gone either way.
Oh yeah, no, it was not a given by far because I mean, initially it started with there a lot of roadblocks. They didn't want to communicate, and it took me just taking a shot in the dark and emailing somebody that was actually pretty high up on this service provider's corporate, and I got a response. And from there, it went through an entire investigation. I kind of went through a deposition with their investigator, who was basically the head of their regional training division. And like I said, an entire inspection was done. It was like a detective work. I had to send pictures of the parts, the improper parts that were used. They talked to the mechanic at the trailer shop that actually made the correct repair, used the correct parts. He had to give a statement, and it did. I mean, they completely accepted fault when the investigation was done. And like I said,
James, the point is that while you're doing all of that, you're still having to run your business, and you're still driving in your business.
Well, exactly. And that's kind of what I was getting at as well. I was doing all that right there at the same time that's going on. Is I've also got my business side of it. I've got my other trucks that may need problems. I got, it's like they said, Johnny Appleseed had a whole bunch of feathers in his hat. That's kind of what was going on. And it's hard to keep track of it all, hard to keep it all straight.
And it really highlights the big difference between working for a company and doing a job and owning that company that does that job. It really requires two different skill sets. So, what I see in a lot of cases is you'll have somebody who's a driver, or maybe they're a technician or something like that. And what kind of company do they start? Well, of course, they start a fleet or they start a repair shop. But just because you were good at the job doesn't mean you're going to have the skill set to be able to operate a business that does that thing. Tom, you've got a lot of business experience. You've started and built companies, sold companies. What's your take on that?
Well, that's the part that makes all of this so exciting and so aggravating at the same time, because you're typically going to do a business that you know about and you know how to do. So you're obviously going to be the first employee, right? Mm-hmm. So you, regardless of what the business is, whether it's computer consulting, driving a truck, or making dinners for a new restaurant or whatever. I mean, typically people don't open restaurants if they don't know how to cook, right? So regardless of what business you're in, you're typically the first employee and makes you the critical employee. But the problem is you're also the one who has to make sure that the food gets ordered and that everything gets put together and that the restaurant is actually able to come up and run. And over time, you realize you can't do both equally well. And as the business continues to grow, you're going to have to give up some of the pieces that you love in order to keep the business growing the way you want it to grow at the pace that you want it to grow. And that gives you, and then sometimes to either having people who maybe don't know the business as well as you making business decisions for you, or you're having to back off and say, all right, well, I don't get to drive this much, or I don't get to cook that much, or I don't get to code that much because I want us to be able to grow, and I can't do both.
It's this age-old struggle between working in the business and working on the business. And, really, I think a lot of people who are very good at the technical work that they do, maybe they're a professional driver, or to your point, they're a great chef, or they're a mechanic or something like that. Oftentimes when they go and start that business, they kind of realize almost after it's too late that they almost hate running the business. On the flip side of that coin, oftentimes I've seen situations where someone has been, adequate in their job, but then when they go to start a business doing that thing, they become, it just lights them up because they are really well suited to working on the business. But you always have this transition period between when you're starting the business new and you've got to do everything to then adding people, and managing that can be tremendously difficult. So it's very important to be very self-aware about what your strengths and weaknesses are, and to understand that as I build this business and I grow this business, I'm going to have to surround myself with people who have offsetting strengths to my weaknesses. And I think this is a really important part of being successful in business. Now, James, in your story, there's almost like a subplot, and that is the difficulty you've been having finding parts. The supply chain issues they're really catching up to a lot of businesses. And I think the problems are just beginning for a lot of businesses. When we come back from our break, we're going to talk about that impact, and we're going to give you a real world example, and we're going to give you some advice on, as a business owner, how you need to make sure that you've built contingency plans for events that maybe are a worst case scenario. So after our break, we'll talk more about that. We're looking forward to you staying with us. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Dr. Christopher Kortman, and now for the Mental Health Minute. Here on the Gulf of Mexico, we sometimes have a condition called riptide. And riptide is a current, a very narrow band of water that has the power to suck you out to sea. And people are advised not to fight against the riptide, and not certainly to flow with it. Either way, there's a good chance you'll drown. The advice is to swim out of the narrow band that is perpendicular to the shore. And that means either north or south, but do not go east or west for fear of being overpowered by the riptide. What does that have to do with the Mental Health Minute, you ask? The same thing is true about our negative thoughts sometimes. What we need to do is not fight them, not battle them, not succumb to them, but swim out of them. For instance, get up out of bed. We're not supposed to be in bed more than 10 or 15 minutes if we're not sleeping. Pick up a book. Turn on your favorite comedy. Call a friend. Go for a walk. Do something to change the channel in your head and swim out of the riptide. There's an excellent chance you'll feel much differently in a very short period of time. And you will never drown in your own negative thoughts.
Building Strong Minds with Dr. Christopher Kortman every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. As a professional driver, you are always being told about the importance of physical fitness, your health. But what about mental fitness? On the show each week, we take on a new topic, from loneliness to the power of gratitude to how to build strong relationships, all from the perspective of a driver's life. Every Monday on TNC Radio Live at 7 p.m. Eastern. It's Building Strong Minds.
For the latest in traffic, weather, and information, catch the Morning Grind weekdays right here on tncradio.live.
Welcome back to Mind Your Trucking Business on tncradio.live.
You're listening to Mind Your Trucking Business with Tom Kelly, James Rogers, and I'm Jamie Irvin. Gentlemen, we've been having a good conversation about the realities of people who want to start their own business, especially if you want to start a trucking fleet and you want to transition from being a driver to being a business owner. Tom, before the break, we were talking about how the supply chain issues are kind of a subplot of the story that James was telling us. Could you kind of give our audience a little bit of an overview of some of the supply chain issues that we've been seeing? And then we're going to, James and I are going to go deep on his specific example, and we'll talk a little bit about my experience as well. But, for those who are saying, okay, I thought those supply chain issues were over, are they over?
No and yes. There some of the things that we struggled with before, having 100 ships sitting offshore off the coast of Los Angeles, and that stuff's over. But here's the problem. That doesn't necessarily make things better. Part of the problem is that orders are way down now, and that has shifted where the problem is from just the left hand to the right hand. Okay, so we still have a supply chain issue. It's just not where it physically was before. Now it's physically in other areas. For instance, you may have had a factory that was having a hard time developing a particular part because they had a lack of the parts that they needed to build the part, right? So they have, let's say, a lack of plastic that they need to work with. Now they can get the plastic, but the problem is now people aren't ordering the part like they were before. So, and now you're having more troubles getting, I mean, the whole thing's just kind of shifting around. And right now, it's making it very difficult for those who are trying to service this industry to know where should they invest their money, because this idea of just-in-time building your parts and then shipping them to the clients as they need them, right now it's very difficult to understand what it is that the clients need and the timing that they need it, because it's been shifting because the government has, right, wrong, or indifferent, increased interest rates a lot, which is slowing down consumer spending. Some say dramatically, some aren't as sure, but because consumer spending is changing, it is going to have an impact on the overall way that things flow in this economy. And so we may be getting just what we wanted, but not in the way we wanted it.
Well, and what I'm also seeing is because of limited raw materials, you have manufacturers of parts for trucks, and what they're doing is they're having to make choices. So they have tier 1 OEM manufacturers of trucks buying parts from them for those assembly lines, and they cannot afford to lose those customers. So they're prioritizing the raw materials that they do have for new truck construction, new trailer construction. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that someone like James, who operates a vehicle that's a couple years older, is having a tremendous difficulty getting access to tier 2 parts, aftermarket replacement parts, because they are prioritizing the manufacturing for new truck manufacturing. So this is one of the reasons, James, why you're having difficulty getting parts for your older trucks.
Difficulty isn't the word. I mean, myself, I had trouble finding a solenoid, fan solenoid for a 2005 Western Star. I literally had to travel 200 something miles out of the way a week ago to get one, because my engine fan wouldn't turn off, just because of a little $20 something part. I couldn't find one within 200 miles. So I literally had to go 200 miles to find one. Just recently, here in the last 48 hours, I had a driver that threw an accessory belt on a 2015 Freightliner, Cascadia. Nobody in Memphis, within 150 miles of Memphis, had that belt. So I had to go here to St. Louis. Luckily, I found a guy that said he had 11 of them, and I went at like 10 o'clock at night, picked 2 of them up, drove to 300 miles to get him off the side of the road. Finding parts, it's becoming difficult. And then more so, with that, a lot of the people that provide like roadside assistance or mechanics, because of this part, a lot of these places are having to cut time, cut employment, cut labor, cut the hours that these guys are working, and the availability for them to do the work. If you can find the part, it's becoming a challenge, and it's one of them. Okay, it's one of the parts in the plan of, okay, if this fails, do I enact plan B? When is the way things are kind of going? It's just another one of the plot pieces that's like, holy cow, what do you do?
Right. And I see that, we've seen fleets going out of business, right? We had Land Air, we reported on a few weeks ago. Yeah. You just mentioned, James, before we started this episode, that you heard of another one. What's the other fleet that just shut? Colonial.
Yep, they're a family-owned truck company. I can't remember the exact number of trucks. They had a couple, about 100 trucks or so. They're a reefer company, family-owned, 70-plus years in business. They just up and said, enough. Enough's enough.
Well, and I'm seeing that like I work as a consultant, so I work with a lot of different companies, and I know of one of my clients. They are having a tremendous difficulty finding the technicians that they need. They are having difficulty with a really wild upswing, and then it's like this huge upswing of volume of work that they got a couple months ago, and then all of a sudden it's just plummeted over the summer. So that is really difficult because it creates a lot of volatility in your cash flow. They don't have enough people to get the work done, and then all of a sudden they go from going, well, we can't find enough people, to saying, well, maybe we have to lay somebody off. Yeah. And, it creates stress for me, because when I look at this client, they're a large client of ours. They represent a significant percentage of our revenue. And I start to go, what if all of a sudden they can't meet their financial obligations and they go down? Well, now I haven't done anything wrong. I've been doing my part. My company is doing everything that they can to do things the right way, and yet we're still at risk of potentially losing a client. What happens if all of a sudden that revenue for my company now disappears, right? So not only does all the people working for this company experience the loss of their employment if they were to go down, but then all of the people who are suppliers to that company also could then suffer. Yeah. So it's this trickle down effect, but it really forces you as a business owner to create contingency plans so that you can say, okay, well, if this happens, what does that do to my cash flow, and what strategic decisions do I need to make in my business?
Exactly. I mean, and chain reaction is a good word to use. It really is. It's what's going on with the supply chain. It's caused a huge chain reaction, like Tom said, to where at one point we had hundreds of ships waiting off the coast. Now we don't have that, but we still have the logistical problem. We have the availability problem now, and it's creating, employers to make choices on labor. Can we afford to pay these guys? Can we keep somebody available 24 hours to, like in your situation of, people having to make decisions that's ultimately going to affect you. And then on my side, same thing. I've got drivers. We work on a lot on the spot market, and where we were available for 48 states, it's really become very, very small areas where we're able to operate because of the same thing, where you've got shippers that they don't want to ship nothing now, or you got customers that don't want to spend money to move anything now. It really is creating a trickle down effect across the whole board. And it is, you start looking at plan B, C, and then, in the case of hit the red button.
Yeah. And that's something that I think is important to note, is that, when you're a small business owner, your family's future hangs in the balance of your failure or success. And so for me, I definitely have that nuclear option that if I had to, I could pull the ripcord, and I've got a plan for that, but it would be extremely painful to watch the demise of my company and have to lay off all my people. And then this is an area we don't want to go. So then the question is, what strategies can we put in place to help us to mitigate some of the volatility? And is, some of it's within our control and some of it isn't. So how do we cope with that? I think that's an area that we need to discuss in more detail. So we will come back after our break and we will talk a little bit more about that. And then we're going to round out the episode, today's show, with a discussion about some of the news items that we've seen related to AB5. So we'll be right back.
I'm Shelley Johnson with Kathy Tuccaro. You can hear us Tuesdays on TNCRadio.live at 8 p.m. Eastern on Women Road Warriors. And don't miss Steve Summers' Overnight Drive right here on TNCRadio.live, weeknights midnight to 5 a.m. Eastern. Brought to you by Hot Shot Secret. Great leaders challenge their people not to stop at the first right answer, Tighten the Lug Nuts is the book that will help you move past that first right answer to be more effective, more productive, and more successful. This book serves as a blueprint that can be easily applied by leaders, entrepreneurs, truckers, owner-operators, all of us in our everyday lives. This is one of the best leadership books you can read to help you accelerate towards your personal and professional goals. Plus, a portion of the proceeds will be donated to truckerschristmasgroup.org. Visit TightenTheLugNuts.com to order your copy today.
Welcome back to Mind Your Trucking Business on TNCRadio.live.
Thanks, Ron. My name is Jamie Irvin, and I'm with Tom Kelly. Hello, Tom.
Hello, sir.
And we're also with James Rogers. James?
Yes, sir.
So we've been having a good conversation today about the realities of running a business. I think there's a lot of volatility right now. Tom, I'd like to get your opinion on something. As a business owner, how do you manage because there's really two kinds of problems, right? There's problems that are within your control to do something about, and then there's challenges and problems that are coming your way that really you have no control over. So from your experience, what are some of the tactics or strategies you've used as someone who's run businesses to kind of cope with that?
The first thing you have to do is identify which is which, because, and I know that sounds like kind of a cop-out answer, but stick with me here for a second. It's hard sometimes to know which things you actually have control over and which things you don't. And trying to make that decision, can I actually drive change on this thing and make it better? Sometimes the answer is no, you really can't. But you have to take the time to figure out, is this really, if I spend any time on this, am I going to make the situation any better? And if the answer is no, then you've got to start making the preparation to figure out how you're going to deal with the situation as opposed to improving the situation. Right?
Yeah.
And those are
Agreed.
two things, right? Well, one is you have to respond, and the other is you need to react. And those might sound like the same thing, but they're not. When you're responding to something, if you take medicine and the doctor says, "Hey, you're responding really well," I mean, that's a good thing, right? But if you take the medicine and you react to it, well, that's a negative. So what are you doing in this particular thing? What do you need to do? Okay, sometimes you just have to react and do the things that maybe aren't pleasant, but have to be done because you've got a situation that you have no control over whatsoever. For instance, not being able to get the part that you need to keep your fleet up and running. Okay, you can't go build the part. Okay, but there are ways to go get parts, and you have to drill those down and figure out exactly what are your avenues that you have. There are other things though that, look, if your part is on a boat and the boat's stuck out off the coast of LA, it doesn't matter how good your sources are. It's out there. There's nothing you can do till the boat gets in the dock. And even then, it could be a while before it gets unloaded. So kind of recognizing where am I and what's really happening here so that I know whether or not to spend my worry time on things that, why worry about things you can't control? There's nothing you can do about the things you can't control. You figure out about the things you can control and you do your best there. I think we're all familiar with the Serenity Prayer, right?
Yeah.
Give me the, and it just went out of my head. What do you got it off the top of your head?
Oh, I'm pulling it up right now. I knew it was coming.
Well, while you're pulling that up, James, I'll just make the comment that the reason why this is so important is that if you start to exert limited resources on trying to address a problem that's outside of your control, chances are those limited resources are being, it's not going to create a result for you. And at the same time, you're creating almost like a double negative, because on the other side of that coin, you're not putting resources towards something that is within your control. So assessing these problems correctly is absolutely essential. James, do you have the Serenity Prayer there?
I do. The one most commonly repeated, spoken from memory: "O God and Heavenly Father, grant to us a serenity of mind to accept that which cannot be changed, courage to change that which can be changed, and wisdom to know the one from the other. Through Jesus Christ our Lord, amen."
Yeah, that's 100%, right?
It is 100% on, like you guys are saying, and he was saying. I mean, that's a hard thing to get, like, is what I can change, what I can't change, and which one is worth me putting my energy into. And for the last couple of weeks, we were talking about it off air. That's, for me, that's been one of the things this last couple of weeks of what can I change? What can I change? Where's my energy got to go? And it's been a struggle, just because for me as the business owner, and like Tom said, I'm also an employee, the most important employee. And it's like, I have so many hats to wear, and that's something that's very, very important. That number one, to run a small business, a small fleet, it takes a lot of energy, and you're going every which way. And then this prayer and what we're talking about is absolutely on point of what can I change? What can't I change? Like, I can't change the rates right now. Can I sit there and fight all day long and maybe not take this load because it's not paying what it needs to pay? Yeah, but I still, at the end of the day, I can't change that. I can't. What I can change or react to is obviously the parts part. That's very difficult for me. And I've found that in order to help my fleet stay running and keep my guys up, we've had to expand trying to find parts or stuff. And if we're in an area and something simple like a belt, hose, or whatever, I grab a couple. And I found myself being kind of like a parts runner. If one of my guys needs part, I got one. I'll get it to you. That's kind of where it's gone for me.
Yeah, I caught that when you were telling your story a little while ago. I thought that was very interesting that when you finally got the part that you needed identified, you grabbed two of them.
Yeah.
Realized this is a part that's hard to find, and if it's happened once, I might just need it again, so let's have a spare just in case. Plus, there's always that potential of damaging the part when it's installed and that kind of stuff. So having, so again, it's part of just, you do what you can, and hopefully it works. But at the end of the day, there's not magic here.
Mm-mm.
Okay, it's hard work, but it can also be so rewarding and so much fun when it does work right.
Well, and what I really enjoy is, like, for example, with him buying the extra part. So you're sacrificing a little bit of cash flow in order to prevent further expenses down the road, where you'd be stuck on the side of the road and you would incur all kinds of expenses far in excess of buying that extra part. But that's an example of, like, look, this is in my control. I can make a strategic decision here, and I can do something that down the road is going to have a positive impact on the business. And sometimes when you're going through these difficult stretches, you do kind of need to hang on to the fact that, look, it's bad now, but it won't always be bad. And when it's good, it won't always be good either. Like, this is being in business is a cyclical thing. It's a cycle. And things go up and things go down, and this is going to continue. And I think that's really important to understand, that when you're running a business, you're playing an infinite game here. Mm-hmm. This is not a defined game where, just like if you think of a football game, you've got a specific number of players on the field, you have agreed upon rules, you have a start time and end time, and you can declare a winner. That's not what it's like to run a business. With running a business, like, there's an infinite number of players, there's no start and stop time. It just is like, how long can you be in the game? Mm-hmm. And when you start to understand that, it does help you to make better strategic decisions. But I think having that mental and emotional fortitude when things are tough to be able to try to stay as even keeled as possible and to have a little bit of faith. Believe it or not, I think there is an element of faith in this, that look, if I do the right things and I do them long enough, I'm going to get the result I'm looking for. And sometimes it takes longer than you wished, or it costs more than you were hoping. But, my experience has been that when you do things the right way on a long enough timeline, it does pay off.
Yep. There's a quote that I used to use when I was an instructor in the military talking to privates, that putting them through emotions, hey, you got to train on this. And it got to a say, they try to go so fast and they'd mess up. And I got a saying from that is that fast is slow and slow is fast. And I had to have that discussion with one of my owner operators this past week because he's concerned. And I understand his concern. And I said, look, if you're not scared, I would be concerned in this business. I would. But don't get to a point to where you're doing things so fast that you miss something. In a time period like this, what I found is, and I learned this from COVID, what I mean by fast is slow and slow is fast. Now is the time to be consistent. Mm-hmm. Take your time, step by step, dot your I's and T's as you go. And what's going to happen is that consistency is going to be there. It's okay to be slow, because eventually what happens is that slow becomes repetitive, and then it'll come back. It'll come back and pick up. That consistency is what's needed right now.
It is, yeah, and I agree with that. But there's another element to that, because at the same time, you do have to be decisive. So yes. Being decisive and being impetuous are two different things. So consistency is the antidote to being impetuous, where you're just kind of like chasing shiny things and you're freaking out and you're jumping from one thing to the other. That's not going to work well for you. Right. Whereas if you're consistent, like I say, that's the antidote to impetuousness. But at the same time, you do have to be decisive, because sometimes there's moments in time where you just have to make a decision. And it could be something like, do I buy one or two of these parts? Well, by decisively buying two and sacrificing a little bit of cash flow, you might protect yourself downstream. Another thing,
that's where the fast comes in that the slow is fast. Absolutely.
That's right. And another thing, like from my perspective, okay, so I have a client right now that is in a bit of distress. Does that, what do I do with that information, right? Do I freak out my team? Do we do a panic decision where we jump to conclusions, or do we wait until we get the information we need, and are we ready to make a decisive decision in the moment with the facts as they are? And keeping that separation between the emotion and the facts is really, really important. I think this has been a good discussion, but we've got a bunch of news to talk about. So when we get back from our break, we're going to talk about some of the things that have happened since we were last on air and how it will affect you if you're trying to build a trucking business. You've been listening to Mind Your Trucking Business on tncradio.live. We'll be right back.
Mental health is a topic that isn't addressed enough in the trucking industry. There are many articles, websites, and businesses that can help truck drivers live a healthy lifestyle. But what about mental health? Mental health issues are not uncommon in truck drivers. In fact, trucking poses several risk factors when it comes to mental health issues. Lack of sleep, loneliness, stressful work environment, lack of physical activity. Truck driving can be rewarding, but health issues such as sleep apnea, obesity, diabetes, and depression can result from the strains of the job. So how do drivers prevent these health issues? Stress is an unavoidable part of trucking. Trucking allows you to see beautiful parts of the country, but it also puts you in many stressful situations. Driving in traffic in unfamiliar cities creates stress on a driver. There's stress when you're not sure if you're going to be able to deliver your load on time. You also can become stressed when you're away from home for so long. As you can tell, there are plenty of stress triggers when you drive professionally for a living. One of the best ways to reduce stress is by learning how to handle it. I realize it's easier said than done. It takes time and self-discipline. Here are some examples of ways you can reduce stress as a truck driver. Listen to music or a podcast. Start eating healthy. Exercise or stretch. Talk with family and friends. Get good sleep. Plan your trip out. In addition to managing stress, there are other ways you can keep good mental health while on the road. Drivers often portray the image of being tough. Mental health is not a discussion that many truckers are going to have. Communicating your mental health struggles with friends and family, therapists, or other drivers is a good way to work through your mental health struggles. Here's some more ways you can stay mentally healthy when you're on the road. Stay in touch with loved ones. Establish a morning and night routine. Bring a pet on the road. Travel with your spouse. Consider team driving. Bring things on the road to keep you entertained, like a laptop, video games, or TV. Occasionally book a hotel room. It's nice to get out of your truck every once in a while. Mental health is just as important as physical health. Drivers need to prioritize their mental health and take the necessary steps needed to be mentally healthy. It all starts with communicating with someone you trust, managing stress, and taking time out of the day to do something nice for yourself. For more information on mental health in truck drivers, check out Common Mental Health Issues Truck Drivers Face on thetruckersnetwork.net. Thanks for listening.
Catch Landline Now every night at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, along with an encore presentation weekdays at noon, right here on tncradio.live.
Welcome back to Mind Your Trucking Business on tncradio.live.
And welcome back to TNCradio.live. This is Mind Your Trucking Business. I'm Tom Kelly, along with James Rogers. How you doing, James?
Good. Finally, a little bit of a rest.
Oh, that's
not much, but a little.
And Jamie Urban. Jamie, I guess you've had some vacation time since last we were on the air.
I did. I got to head back home and reconnect with my roots. In some case, one of the places I went, I hadn't been there in 25 years. So It was absolutely fabulous. And I really, really enjoyed that time.
Well, that's great. One of the things that finally happened, we've been talking about this for so long. Finally, a judge has lifted the order that was keeping them from implementing AB5 on the trucking industry. So that order has been lifted. And then everybody went, okay, what does that mean? And so the state of California held a webinar to explain what the next steps were. And guys, I did not personally attend. I've talked to a couple of people who did attend the webinar. And the first webinar, the answer was, yeah, we don't know.
Yeah.
And so they said, well, we're going to have another webinar, so come back next week. So they had another webinar this week, and we still don't know.
They have no clue what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, they know that there's, in some way, they need to come up with the rules about how they're going to implement, enforce, and work with AB5, but they don't exactly have a plan to do it yet. And now we're hearing from several other people that they're planning. There's other people who are planning to file motions against AB5 for reasons that are also appropriate as it includes the trucking industry, but different than the reasons that have already kind of been declined, right?
Yeah.
So they're coming up with different reasons to have this discussion. I find it troubling that they don't have a plan on how they're going to do this, but it's also gives me some hope too that they don't have a plan because at least nothing happens right away because they don't know what they're going to do with what they've got.
Well, and that was one of the things that was asked the whole time that the injunction was in place and all this was, how did they plan to enforce it? And nobody had an answer. So it's kind of like you put a law in place with no way to enforce it. So why put it in place?
Right.
It's and ultimately what it did is, we've discussed this over and over, and I'm not going to beat the dead horse about it, but it puts people out of business for no reason. Why was this law put in place? You targeted one group, but you affected an entire economy. And speaking trucking industry specific, it is. I'm glad that they are coming at it from a different angle with different reasons. And like you said, yeah, one of those webinars I saw part of it. The same thing. I got nothing from it. They have no answers. None.
Yeah. they had some PowerPoints that talked about what it is.
Yeah.
But he basically said, yeah, we know that. Can we move on to how is this going to work? And they simply just don't have that answer yet, which just brings up all sorts of other questions for me and makes me want to say some evil things about politicians and all that. But that's a different show. I guess the point for us right now is we got to continue to keep our eye on what's going on here, because it's not done. Don't let anybody tell you that it's done. We're still working through what all this means, what the details are, and how it's going to impact the entire industry. Yet anybody who tells you they know that, what's the old saying? Those who talk don't know, and those who know aren't talking. I don't think anybody knows.
No.
But we got a lot of people talking.
Yes.
It's going to continue to make it a little crazy, if you will.
Right. I look at the situation now as it's kind of like the center of the storm. Everybody got the wins at the beginning for 2-3 years, and now you're stuck in the middle, in the eye of the storm, and nobody knows what the heck to do.
Yeah. I think that's a good analogy. So that's one of the big things that's been going on. Jamie, we've been talking a lot about supply chain and so forth, and I get from James' perspective as a driver and a fleet owner, some of the things he's seeing. You actually have an entire podcast and business based around the way parts flow in the United States and Canada. What are you seeing right now that has captured your attention recently?
Well, I mentioned it earlier in our discussion today about how manufacturers, so just so everybody is clear, you have a truck that's manufactured like a Kenworth or a Peterbilt, or you've got a Freightliner, or you've got a Navistar International. But the thing is they don't manufacture all of the parts that go into assembling that truck. So they reach out to parts manufacturers and they say, can you make the suspension for us? Can you supply us with the air systems? Can you supply us with the electrical, the lighting, etc.? And so you have all of these parts manufacturers who run basically two businesses. They have a tier 1 OEM division where they make parts, and those parts are often under a proprietary part number, and they go to the truck manufacturer or the trailer manufacturer directly, and then the truck manufacturer assembles the truck with those parts. And then in addition to that, they have a whole other division that supplies parts to the dealerships of that manufacturer, as well as to aftermarket distributors of parts, companies like Fleet Pride and Truck Pro and HDA Truck Pride members and things like that. And so there's a real war between those two divisions now, because there's only so much raw materials available. And there is a very high demand for the new parts to assemble new trucks. And so a lot of times what that means is that means that the second and third owners are just not going to be able to get access to parts for their older equipment, because, when that parts manufacturer has to choose between, well, I only have enough plastic to make so many parts, I'm gonna fulfill my tier 1 obligations. And that's a real issue. But on the flip side of that, we're also seeing a lot of manufacturers becoming very innovative in the products that they're bringing to market. So ironically, we've seen at the same time as massive shortages, we've seen new products being launched. And clearly these products were in development prior to COVID. And perhaps the development of those products have been delayed by COVID by as much as 2 years, but now they're coming to market. So you have this kind of like almost contradictory thing happening in the parts world, where on the one hand, there's all these shortages and these issues related to supply chain. On the other hand, you have new products being brought to market for the aftermarket. And so when I talk to manufacturers, what I'm hearing is I'm hearing them say that there is, at the very minimum, going to continue to be severe disruption into 2024. And when I talk to the heavy duty parts distributors that I work with, they tell me that they have been quoted as much as 70 weeks before they get certain products. And so like the one distributor, I was talking to their CEO, and she said to me, anything over 52 weeks isn't real. We can't count on that. So the challenges that the average truck driver, owner operator, regional fleet, privately held national fleet, they're gonna keep having these problems, because you got to think about the distributor's point of view as well, right? I only have so many products on the shelf, and if I have a client or if I have a customer that has 1,000 units and they give me millions of dollars in business, who am I going to sell the part to? Them or the person with one truck who only gives me $10,000 of business a year? So there's a lot of picking and choosing happening, both at the manufacturing and the parts distribution level, which is making the parts shortage even worse for the privately held fleet or the owner operator. So I wish I had better news to tell you, but that's the reality of what we're up against.
Is there an end in sight? I mean, have you heard that from any of the manufacturers?
Well, when James, when people say 2024, what does that mean? Like January 1st, 2024 or December 31st, 2024? And how could you even predict that? Right. So the reality is nobody knows.
Geez. Yeah. And see, and when I hear that as a fleet owner, what that puts me in is survival mode. I want to tell my guys, hey, once again, if you see a part or you're getting a repair made, get more than one, because one of the other guys may need it.
Well, and expanding your supplier network is the only move you have. So you need to know every person who sells parts in this country, like every person you can meet who sells parts, every company you can form a relationship with. The problem is a lot of companies aren't taking new customers right now because they don't have enough parts to service their existing customers.
Okay, well, and that brings up a question. Is there a database that a fleet owner can access where we can get nationwide access?
Well, I mean, you can go to like Fleet Pride's website and see all of their locations. You can do that with a lot of the dealership groups as well. I actually think the best place to start looking is e-commerce platforms, because there's companies like Find It Parts and other e-commerce platforms that have been launched in the last couple of years. They've been around a lot longer than that, but they've been really coming to the forefront of the parts supply chain in the last couple of years. And those are the best options, because a lot of times you can just find the part, but it's in California or something, and you can have it shipped. It doesn't solve your problem today, but at least you can get access to the part. In addition to that, I think making relationships with manufacturers themselves is a thing too, because there are some manufacturers like Alliant Power, for example. They have OE parts, they have aftermarket parts, and they're awesome. And they will really go the extra mile to help you figure out where the part is, and then they'll help. They'll sell it to you through one of their distributors. So it's just about expanding your supplier network. And if you need help with that, you can definitely reach out to me directly.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, hey, guys, speaking of which, how can people reach out to you directly?
So the best place to reach me is heavydutypartsreport.com. That's my website. That's where all of our contact info, social handles, everything are found. You can follow the show there as well. And that way you can get a hold of me directly through either the contact form on our site or just click one of the social links and send me a message.
Fantastic. And how about for you, James? How can people contact you?
People can contact me. I'm on YouTube. I have a podcast on there. It's called the Road Rage Podcast, or you can just type in the Post Trip. You can actually go to my website as well, SpartanDirectLLC.com. You can email me there or email me directly at SpartanDirect.com or at Absolute.com. Sorry about that. But it's those are the easiest ways to get hold of me, or obviously through the show's actual email.
Absolutely. And you can drop us a note here at info@tncradio.live. And we will be happy to help you with more contact information. Guys, it's been quite a week, and we keep going, I feel like, for another 2 hours. Mm-hmm. We're going to stop it here for tonight, and we'll pick it back up next week right here on Mind Your Trucking Business on tncradio.live. I'm Tom Kelly, in for Jamie and James, and we'll be back next week.
Don't forget, you can hear all of our TNC Radio primetime shows again on our podcasts. Just go to tncradio.live/podcasts or search for tncradio.live wherever you listen to podcasts.
Do you have the tncradio.live app? It's free and easy to download. Just go to app.tncradio.live, Google Play, or the App Store. Get access to live streaming radio developed by drivers for drivers. Download the tncradio.live app today.